Hey guys, it's Kathy. I hope you guys are doing well. How's my mic volume? Because I get comments that my mic volume is way too loud and it's way too low. I can't fix both of those at once. I can only fix one of them. So you guys will tell me if I need to fix it. I'll fix it. I'm a goat. I'm a Capricorn. Let's see. And I'm going to do something real quick. I'm starting a poll. They wanted a poll on pineapples on pizza. So I started it. And this is going to be the end of this discussion. The answer is yes. Hope, show this to your son later. A huge happy birthday to Hope's son, who's turning 17. Now, listen, son, listen closely. You're not an adult. Listen to your mother. You're not an adult. And even when you are an adult, you're not an adult. Even when you're 30, you're not an adult. Don't tell me you can't hear me. Okay, it's a tad low because they said I was blowing their ears out. So I didn't think I was, but so the volume is down real low. Now the volume is almost half, not half, but almost half. And unless you guys tell me it's terrible, I'm not changing it. And listen to your mother. Even when you're 30 and you think you're an adult, you're not an adult. You'll never be the adult she is, just like your children will never be the adult you are. And then listen to your mother. Okay. So I started a little bit early, but anybody who doesn't make it on time, it's all right. They're not missing anything. They're just not. I'm just previewing something that I have on Patreon. So, but I'm trying to, but no one will let me. They didn't want me to go live today. Sorry, I bothered you. You were on me. Hey, XJ. Hey, Jay. Hey, Julie Cat. Hey, Rebecca. Hey, Kelly. Hey, Carolyn. Carolyn, I got a surprise for you. Hey, Sally Port. Hey, Sherry. I don't want to miss anybody. I really don't. Hi, Shana. I hope. I got high hopes. Did I miss anybody? Rebecca? Kelly? I think I got everybody. I don't know. I'm trying to scroll up. Man, you guys talk a lot. Tammy. Hi, Tammy. Almost missed you because you were second. You're a first loser. You're second. Rebecca takes the prize today. Rebecca was here first. Hi, Debbie. Yeah, I do. I have Rebecca gave me the logo. So yeah, I'm putting it on everything now. And don't worry, I gave up on my sublimation printer for now. I'm gonna just have someone do it. I found a local company. Support local, guys. Always support local when you can. Don't go to Amazon, even though I love Amazon. But if you can support local, do support local. So, oh jeez, these cats are killing me. Just they're killing me today. Wait, I gotta put that up. All right, Carolyn, this is mostly for you. Kind of, but not all, because this lawyer is so good, guys. I know I've said it a couple times, but now I want to explain. You know what? Let me just give you a preview quick of what I put on my Patreon. Let's start there. It's just 2 minutes long.
You offered to me to show an image of how you had done that measurement. Do you agree?
Yes.
You have not attached your affidavit, have you?
No, what I meant was I would scroll onto the optical site and draw the angles for you.
Right, and you've not attached to your affidavit, have you, any image where you have carried out that measurement of 17 degrees?
No, there isn't one attached there.
And the reason you haven't attached one is because when you use the tools available on the imaging system to measure on that X-ray from 18 February 2011, the degrees of valgus, it is slightly less than 10 degrees.
Now, the reason is because I don't have a way of saving that film in that program for you to give it to you. The only way I could do it would be maybe to take a photo on my phone or something of that nature, which may not be acceptable to you. But in fact, that 17 degrees valgus may actually even be an underestimate of the true position, because the long leg films that are taken are non-weight bearing films by necessity, because Mrs. Mooney was still only about 2 or 3 weeks following her surgery. So I think 17 degrees is probably, if anything, an underestimate of the degree of deformity.
You are here, aren't you, to do the best you can whenever you answer a question?
Yes.
To criticise Dr. Almadiris as much as possible. Isn't that your aim?
No, it's to get the truth of what happened and to be an advocate for the truth.
Now, is there any reason why, given you've now provided affidavits, you didn't agree to provide an affidavit last year to assist?
I didn't have the time to do it at the time that I was asked to. The time frame that it had to occur was, I couldn't get it done. I was clinically too busy.
And so that's the only reason, is it, why?
Yes.
You gave oral evidence as opposed to producing an affidavit?
Yeah, there was a timeline that I was required to put the affidavit in, and I couldn't meet that timeline, so the alternative was to give oral evidence.
But you were happily cooperating with the Channel 9 lawyers, and it was just a question of timing, was it?
Oh, she just smacks them down. She just smacks them down. Chrysanthou. Chrysanthou. Chris. Krista's back in Kansas, guys. Hi, Krista. Oh, thanks. Thank you. Thu. Chrysanthou. Chrysanthou, Mom. Don't say that. She's gonna get me. Guys, the lawyer's gonna get me. So anyway, that's what is on my Patreon. Now, this trial, there is zero way I can get the whole trial because it started years ago. Now, I'm not talking about the case started years ago. That's not what I said. That's not what I meant. The trial started years ago and it keeps going. Now, you saw we first played the first clip in March. We first played the first clip in March. And then April I put some more up. And then I got some from May. It just keeps going on and on. And there's no way to get it all. There's no way. They don't save it or anything. There's no way I could get it all. So what we have pieces of this trial that I have on my Patreon. And in every single one of these pieces, this lawyer, oh gosh. So if you hear the noises, my cats are destroying everything behind this little thing right here. And I'm going to have to deal with that when I finish my stream. I don't know why they're so riled up today, but they are. Anyway, it's years. This trial's been going on for years. And that's why I can't get it all. So I get what I can. You get what you get. If you want to see this lawyer who is mesmerizing when she works, go to my Patreon and you can go for free. You don't have to pay. But I have clips. I have, full days of trial there. And I'll keep getting them as I can. The trial is at night. So it's like 8 o'clock at night to 3 o'clock in the morning. I can't always record that because I'm at work when it starts. and then when I get home, I have to get busy getting these clips together. So it would be impossible for me to get it all. I would have to stop doing live streams of other things, and I would have to find someone to click record at 8 o'clock at night. So, hi, Tammy. I hope you're doing well. So that's a preview. Okay, and now it's 4:30, and this is when I normally start my stream. So anybody who came after 4:30, well, I don't normally start it at 4:30. In my head, I try to start it at 4:30. Hi, Cloud. Hey, thank you. I'll put that up. Thank you, Cloud. Yeah, you can go. You can go to Patreon for free, and you can see all these clips. I don't have any clips that are there just for paid members. You can see them all. Speaking of, though, paid members, thank you so much, Foofs and Mike Tumala, for subscribing to Patreon. There's 3 levels. Well, there's free, that's not a level. And then there's 3 paid levels. And Foofs did the second tier, and Mike did the big tier, the ultimate tier. So thank you. I really appreciate it. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Hi, Dark Knight. Am I missing anybody? Don't say, oh, Lisi's here. Hi, Lisi. Okay. Now let's go. Someone said the Georgia accent. We're going to go to Georgia. We're going to go to Georgia. And, keep in mind, guys, this is a lesson for all of us. If you're going to break the law, don't break the law. Don't break the law if you're breaking the law. Hey, Elizabeth. Hi. All right, Georgia. Here we go to the one excellent accent and then into another excellent accent.
Broxton.
Ooh, that's loud.
Okay, yeah, all right. They tell me you're here today. Y'all have some quiet, please.
Quiet, please.
Tell me you're here today to enter a plea of guilty to certain charges against you. Before I can decide whether or not to accept your plea, I must first determine whether you're doing this knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily. That is, do you know and understand what you're doing? Move that microphone, please.
I'm going to switch that. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes. So I'm going to be asking you a number of questions. If I ask you a question and you answer the question, I'm going to assume that you understood the question. So if you do not understand my question, please stop me and tell me, okay?
He told me to stop him and tell him if I had a question and I didn't understand something. And I do have a question and I don't understand something. Guys, really? Really? 48% of you said no to pineapples? Who hurt you? Who hurt you that bad that you would just say no to pineapples on a pizza? No. Of course you can put pineapples on a pizza. Of course you can. I'm ending this poll because it hurt my feelings.
Yes, sir. Please raise your right hand. And you swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
All right. Put your hand down there and tell me, how old are you?
23. 23.
3?
Yes, sir.
How far did you get in school?
I graduated.
Are you able to read, write, and understand the English language?
Yes, sir.
There's a sworn statement here that has a number of rights listed on it, and then a number of answers out to the left-hand side indicating that you understood those rights. Were you able to read and understand those rights, or have someone explain them to you so that you could understand them?
Yes, sir.
And did you provide the answers out there on the left-hand side indicating that you understood those rights?
Yes, sir.
And are those answers true and correct?
Yes, sir.
And is that your signature on that form, swearing before the clerk that those answers are true and correct?
Yes, sir.
Number 12 is not answered. There's no answer by number 12.
That should be a yes, Your Honor.
Well, yeah, that's the critical one. Don't change it on here, change it on mine, on the original. Let him initially, please. Let him initially, since you changed it after the fact.
I understand.
It's basically what we agreed to.
Mm-hmm.
So the initial right there.
say that's your signature swearing before the clerk that those answers are true and correct?
Yes, sir.
Was there anything on there you did not understand?
No, sir.
Have you ever been diagnosed or treated for any mental illness?
Okay, can you repeat that for me?
Have you ever been diagnosed or treated for any mental illness?
No, sir.
Are you now under the influence of any alcohol, drugs, narcotics, or other medication that would have an effect on your ability to know and understand what's going on here today?
No, sir.
I've been told there's been certain negotiations between you and your lawyer in the district attorney's office, and you expect the district attorney to make a recommendation in your case. You understand I do not have to accept that recommendation, but if I do not accept it, I'll give you a chance to withdraw your plea.
Yes, sir.
Other than them agreeing to make a recommendation in your case, has anybody promised you anything to get you to plead guilty?
No, sir.
Anybody threatened you in any way or used any force or any?
Everybody needs to behave, guys. Everybody needs to behave because Colin's here. We got to show Colin that we're professionals over here. And everything works perfectly and smooth. And all the clips are great. Hi, Colin. Oh, man, I saw that Judge Simpson clip you had. Whoo, he had a day. He had a day. It was great because I haven't seen Judge Simpson in so long. So I needed that. I told everybody to go watch. I'm waiting for everybody to say hi to Colin. Everybody says, everybody loves when Colin comes over. Everything stops. I watched Lone Wolf's video today too, and that woman got lucky. Lone Wolf has a clip on today where she was selling fentanyl and then someone died. And, they were trying to decide whether to charge her, with the murder or not the murder or whatever. And she got lucky because the doctor's report said that the guy or girl, I don't know, I'm just going to say the guy died from a bunch of things. Like when he took the drugs, it interacted with medications that they were taking. And the doctor couldn't say positively that he wouldn't have died if he didn't take the fentanyl, but it definitely contributed to it. So they had to go to the judge who knows the law, Judge Ricky. He knows the law so well. Pulled out this Supreme Court case and said, "Well, this is it. This is what we have to go by." And she's still going to jail. She's going to jail, but she's not going to jail for murder. Okay, I didn't miss anything while I was talking. I can't. I can't watch chat while I talk, or I forget everything. Hi, Terry. All right, Colin. We're in Georgia now, but then we're going to Australia. Everything tries to kill you in Australia, especially this lawyer. Whew.
Violence against you to get you to plead guilty.
No, sir.
Right. You understand you're charged here with theft by receiving stolen property and criminal damage to property in the second degree?
Yes, sir.
You understand that if you were to be convicted of all of those charges, you could be sentenced from 1 to 15 years in the penitentiary?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any questions about the charges against you or the maximum punishment you could receive?
No, sir, I do not.
You tell me you're seeking first offender treatment, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any felony conviction anywhere?
No, sir.
Now, with regard to first offender treatment, I need to advise you that if a first offender probationer violates the terms of his probation and the court then enters an adjudication of guilt, the court may then impose any sentence permitted by law for which the probationer has been found guilty of committing. Therefore, at a probation revocation hearing and upon an adjudication of guilty, a first offender probationer may be resentenced to a sentence that is greater than the one imposed at the entry of the original plea. And of course, if you are so resentenced, you'll get credit for whatever time you've already served on this sentence against that new sentence. Now, do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Understanding that, do you still desire to be considered for first offender treatment?
Yes, sir.
You are advised that if you're not a citizen of the United States, a plea of guilty will have an impact on your immigration status. Do you understand?
Yes, sir, I do.
Do you understand that you have the right to plead not guilty and demand a jury trial, in which case the state will be required to prove your guilt of each element of the crime charged against you beyond a reasonable doubt?
Yes, sir.
If you plead not guilty, the Constitution guarantees you at trial, among other possible rights, the following: the right to a speedy and public trial by jury, the presumption of innocence, the right to confront and question the witnesses against you, the right to subpoena witnesses and evidence in your favor, and the right to present those witnesses and that evidence during the trial. You'd have the right to the assistance of a lawyer during the trial. You'd have a right to testify if you wanted to, but you would also have the right against self-incrimination. That is, no one could make you testify, and if you chose to not testify, that fact could not be held against you or be used against you in any way. You would testify or not, and you personally would make that decision. Now, do you understand it? By pleading not guilty or remaining silent and not entering a plea at all, you would obtain a jury trial with all of those rights?
Yes, sir.
You understand that if you plead guilty, you give up all of those rights and it won't be a trial.
Yes, sir.
Give me the facts and circumstances, please, ma'am, with the recommendation of the district attorney's office.
Yes, Your Honor. On June 1st of 2023, Mr. Archer reported a box truck, one of his work trucks, stolen out of Washington County, Georgia. Later that same day in Jefferson County, Georgia, Deputy Tanner was traveling on Georgia Highway 540 when he noticed a vehicle exceeding the speed limit and a box truck following behind it. He initiated a traffic stop intending to pull over the speeding vehicle when the box truck suddenly made a sharp right turn and ultimately lost control and ran into a brick front porch of a home here in Jefferson County. So Deputy Tanner went to the box truck and asked the driver, who turned out to be Mr. Broxton, for some identification. He also ran the truck, and it was the one stolen out of Washington County earlier in that day. So the state's recommendation in this case is going to be for count one, theft by receiving, 5 years with 1 to serve and a remainder on probation. And count two is also going to be 5 years with 1 to serve, and it's going to be concurrent to count one. There will be credit for time served as allowed by law, and this is under the First Offender Act. For the special conditions, there is going to be a restitution finding, but we will need to have a separate hearing later on to determine that exact amount. It's going to be report to probation, a Fourth Amendment waiver, provide a bodily specimen, no contact with the victim, provide a records release, undergo evaluation for substance abuse, abide by a curfew, provide a DNA sample, avoid use or being in the presence of alcohol or drugs, and maintain gainful employment.
And you've checked and he doesn't have any prior record.
He does not. He does not.
All right. Mr. Brockton, you heard that recommendation. Is that the recommendation that you expected her to make and the one to which you have agreed?
Yes, sir.
Part of that recommendation is while you're under this sentence, you'll give up your Fourth Amendment right against search and seizure, and you have to agree that as a special condition of probation, you shall submit to a search of your person or property any time of the day or night, with or without your consent and with or without a search warrant, whenever you are requested to do so by your probation officer or any law enforcement officer. If anything is found in that search, it may then be taken and used against you in any further court proceedings. Now, do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
And do you agree to that?
Yes, sir.
Based upon that, do you now freely and voluntarily admit your guilt to the charges against you, admit the facts as stated by the prosecuting attorney, including her description of your conduct that forms the basis of the...
Mel, you didn't miss much. The only thing I did before I started this was preview something that I have on my Patreon. So don't worry, you didn't miss much at all.
These charges, and do you enter your plea of guilty to these charges against you?
Yes, sir.
We're here today with your attorney, Ms. Carr. Are you satisfied with the services that she has rendered to you in this case?
Yes, sir.
Is there anything else you'd like to say? Is there anything else you would like to say?
No, sir.
Ms. Carr, you heard the recommendation. Is that the one to which you and your client have agreed?
It is, Your Honor.
Satisfied that he understands all of his rights?
I am, Your Honor.
Anything else you'd like to say?
Yes, I just wanted to note that on the sworn statement, it's credit for time served is allowed by law from 6/1/2023. So he has roughly 14 more days accounting.
That's what I figured. All right, Mr. Broxton, the court finds that you understand the nature of the charges against you and the consequence of your guilty plea, that there is a factual basis for the guilty plea, and that you have decided knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily to plead guilty. The court will therefore accept your guilty plea, and I will accept the recommendation as to counts 1 and 2. Each will be a 5-year sentence, with 1 to be served in a penitentiary, followed by the balance on probation. There'll be a $50 fine, restitution to be determined later on, and you have credit as allowed by law. That will be the judgment of the sentence of the court, unless you'd like to withdraw your plea. Would you like to withdraw your plea?
No, sir.
You've been sentenced to a period of confinement as a violation of the law to escape. If you were to escape, you could then be prosecuted for the new offense of escape. You can receive an additional 1 to 10 years in the penitentiary. If a dangerous weapon were to be used by you or others in that escape, you can receive an additional 1 to 20 years in the penitentiary. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
And we'll allow this under the First Offender Act. Hopefully you will no longer have any more trouble. You'll stay straight and clean and sober. Where do you live?
In Sandersville.
Sandersville. Was he ever interviewed to find out how he came in possession of the truck, or is there a likelihood that he actually stole the truck himself, or you don't know?
According to the incident report, the owner of the truck had actually left the truck unlocked with the keys inside of it, so it was pretty easy access, but he had no right when he did take
I
it.
understand that. I just wondered why he was charged with theft by receiving here instead of
I'm not
theft of the
sure.
motor vehicle in Sandersville.
The only thing I could tell was there must not have been any cameras or anything. I mean, I had the same questions, so it was just theft by receiving, because I don't think there was any proof
Did he
of
actually?
that at the act.
All right. Be careful. Under that First Offender Act, you come back, you could get 15 years in whatever's left on this sentence to serve. You understand that?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Judge. May I please be excused?
No. The rest of us got to be here.
Well, may I go chat in the back with everybody?
What are we going to do with Grady Strickland?
I'm going to do a notice of hearing for the next.
So he steals a U-Haul and then he speeds. Well, he was following someone who was speeding. So I would have to assume that he was speeding, right? And then the guy he was following gets pulled over, and instead of him just, going on his merrily way, because he's driving a stolen box truck, not U-Haul, box truck, he turns and crashes the box truck right in front of the police. Listen, if you're going to break the law, don't speed. Don't speed if you're going to break the law. Think about it. If you're going to break the law, don't break the law. Hi, Reese. All right, guys, we're going back. We're going back to this lawyer in Australia because she's awesome. And it's so fun to watch her. And it was so hard for me to stop. I didn't know which part to give you because there's just so much. Many hours on my Patreon. Many, 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 many hours on my Patreon. I have many more hours to upload into my Patreon. It just takes a while. It takes a lot of time, and I'm busy getting court videos and then working. So, and buying sublimation printers that I can't get to work, and, fixing a camera. And I got a P.O. box today, but I didn't get a P.O. box today because now I have to drive down to the post office and show them 2 forms of ID and give them my blood and my firstborn. I don't know, but I got to do something to set it up. I'm getting there. Yeah, if you're going to break the law, hold on, I got to put that on the screen. If you're going to break the law, make sure you're not stupid first. Don't be stupid. No stupid. All right. Now we're going. We're going to Australia. We're going to pretend that this is Carolyn the whole time, or May. We can pretend it's May, but it's really, don't do that, please. Or if my stream shuts down, my cat doesn't want me to do. Stop. Thanks. Don't. I need a mouse. I need a mouse to distract these cats. Someone send me a, do not send me a mouse. Please don't send me a mouse. All right, let's get to Australia before my cats ruin everything.
Made a submission that the earliest possible hearing date was appropriate and consented to the September date that Your Honour offered. So it was not the case that the applicant forced upon the respondents a date that they told Your Honour they would never be able to meet. At that time, in February, Ms Barnett foreshadowed that they were already...
I suppose in fairness, you had asked for as early a date as possible, and I said in light of the circumstances,
Yes.
we could give that.
Listen, I'm going to let this play for a little bit because I accidentally got the clip of the 8-hour court instead of just a little bit that I got for you guys. So watch this for a second while I run and get the other clip real quick.
But it wasn't opposed. There was no
I understand
dispute.
that, but it wasn't, yes, it was in particular circumstances.
Yes, Your Honour, but also in circumstances where the defamation practice note foreshadows that parties should be ready to take a date in these sorts of matters, or even at the first case management. Now, Ms Barnett was aware of and informed Your Honour and us that an amended defence was being prepared, so that was underway. And a consent timetable was entered into in relation to this exchange of evidence. And the day of the, or days before or the day of the evidence being due, Your Honour and we were told that no evidence would be served. So 8 weeks passed, nothing was served. And that resulted in all of the evidence being served on us in a very short time frame leading up to the trial. And Your Honour will recall, I informed Your Honour that in order to accommodate the trial date, I'd changed juniors. I'd gotten rid of 2 excellent juniors and replaced them with 2 other juniors because of the timetable.
I'm assuming you regard them
All
as
excellent,
as
all
well,
excellent.
otherwise,
I've never seen a bad junior, either on my learned friend side or on our side.
We're all used to dealing with hospital hand passes.
Yes. Now, the change in the timetable particularly caused me and my juniors a problem because we were all in another case in July. And I told Your Honour that. I told you that it was going to be a difficulty. Now, it was because of the respondent's failure to comply with the timetable, and Your Honour has seen this correspondence in the past, and it's in the procedural chronology we've handed up before, that when we consented to the amended defence, which was prepared after the respondents had all their lay evidence, we said, we're relying on the defence to answer your claims. You've had the chance to amend after you've put all your lay evidence on.
This is a pleadings point?
It is, Your Honour, and I'm going to explain it. We've relied on your amended defence. You've had the chance to amend it. We've consented to it. We are preparing evidence, and we have been preparing evidence based on your defence. Now, in Rush, and we've given Your Honour the reference, the reason why, unlike many other types of cases, the particulars of justification in defamation take on significance is because even though the respondents have the onus of proof, the applicant goes first in evidence. The applicant has to anticipate all the evidence that's going to be called and meet it based on the particulars, which we endeavoured to do. Now, what then occurred, and I'm not cavilling with Your Honour's judgments about rulings of evidence, is Your Honour formed the view at trial that if the evidence appeared in the affidavits or the expert reports, irrespective of whether it was pleaded, in some cases, not in all cases, it would be allowed in. And on each...
Otherwise relevant.
Yes, Your Honour. And to that extent, on each occasion, I said, well, we might have to respond to this. This takes us by surprise. Now, the first thing to note also on that question is when we got the expert reports on the 28th of June, in circumstances when my learned juniors and I were in a trial in July. It was 852 pages from 5 experts, and it canvassed a wide range of patients. Some of the allegations were consistent with the pleading, some were new allegations, and some were inconsistent with the pleading. On the 14th of August, 2 weeks before the trial started, a new expert report was served of Dr. Flecknoe-Brown 6 weeks late. Further expert reports were served during the trial. Dr. Stalley, 2 expert reports of Dr. Stalley in September and October, a new expert report of Dr. Ruff a few days before we commenced this year in March. Dr. Papadimitriou was called as a lay witness only. And he, without notice, gave expert evidence, which I objected to. He also, without notice, gave bad reputation evidence, which I objected to. Not to be seen anywhere in his outline. And also, in that period, we had the unusual circumstance where we had produced to us scans from patients, Mooney, Golem and Young, that we'd never seen before, that hadn't been discovered, and that we later found out because of Dr. Ruff's affidavit in November, he had obtained through making his own inquiries. So in relation to those patients, relevant scans that Dr. Ruff apparently relied upon that we'd never seen. And we didn't know until then where they'd come from. Similarly, Dr. Papadimitriou, when I cross-examined him, made promises that he could obtain relevant scans that we hadn't seen. The 3 that I, in fact, asked him to find, he didn't find, the ones from Mona Vale Hospital, but his 2 affidavits that were served in February and March this year found other new scans that we'd never seen.
So I'm just impressed that she just stood up there and said, Dr. Papadimitriou, without blinking an eye. Okay, so yeah, it breaks my heart to stop it right here, but she's only talking to the judge right here. And kudos to this judge, because when this lawyer makes a point, she's so powerful about it that all I think is, oh my gosh, that is the most important point I've ever heard in my life. Of course she's right. Yep, she's right. Nothing else. And the judge is like, yeah, but that's not what I'm concerned about. That wasn't the question. This lawyer knows how to handle this. I mean, the judge knows how to handle this lawyer. Well, but this lawyer is just so good. What I want to put on for you guys is her destroying someone on the stand. And she sure does.
I'm just trying to unpack your point, Ms. Grieve. First, he never publicly, to your knowledge, suggested that he didn't make money from surgery. Do you agree or disagree?
Sometimes he made out that he was doing surgeries for free, yes.
But not all his surgeries.
No, not all his surgeries.
So the position was, to your knowledge, that he was portrayed as someone who did some surgeries for free.
Yes. Or sometimes when, he would classify them as free, in reality, the private healthcare fund was paying for them, or the Veteran Affairs would be paying for them. So there was this idea that he was doing these surgeries for free when in fact he was being quite heavily remunerated for them.
You didn't actually know that. You didn't see any documents that prove that, did you?
I did.
You had no basis to say that when my client did a surgery for free, he was lying about that.
No, I didn't claim he was lying, no.
And you had no basis to say he was lying, did you?
We never did.
But what you're implying in your article is that he is.
I disagree.
Is that he is profiteering from his negligent and incompetent surgery on these patients. Isn't that what you're implying?
No.
You knew from his book, didn't you, that in fact he came from a wealthy family in Iraq?
Yes.
And that he inherited money?
I didn't know that specifically.
Well, didn't you read the story about him strapping money to himself in order to come to Australia?
I don't recall that specific detail.
And what I want to put to you is the reference in paragraph 53 was grubby in the sense that it just wasn't legitimate journalism to include it.
I disagree.
And the fact that you hired a private investigator to take a photograph of my client standing next to his partner's expensive car was also grubby, wasn't it?
I wasn't involved in that.
Well, that photo appeared in one of your articles, didn't it?
Yes.
And you knew it was happening, didn't you?
Vaguely, yes. And it's normal practice, really.
Normal practice for who?
For 60 Minutes.
It's normal practice, isn't it, for grotesque tabloid journalism?
I disagree with your phrasing.
It's not normal practice for an investigative journalist working on a broadsheet newspaper.
What?
To pay an investigator to secretly take photos of someone standing next to their expensive car in order to make a non-point about the fact that he owns an expensive car.
There's about 5 propositions caught up in that. My friend should be very careful about the question she's putting. The question is it unusual to hire a private investigator? That question should be put. And if a question wants to be put about the proper characterisation, it should wait the answer.
Need to be careful because you added in the end a factual premise that wasn't accepted by the witness.
It's wholly unusual for an investigative journalist on a broadsheet newspaper in this country to hire an investigator to take secret photos of someone standing next to an expensive car.
I didn't hire the investigator. But it's normal practice within 60 Minutes. And the point was that the financial aspect of this story was significant to patients because many who were already vulnerable had spent their life savings, their superannuation, remortgaged their house. So the financial aspect of this story was relevant. And so we saw it as relevant to include these points because it goes to that point.
It was irrelevant to connect his wealth to whether he was overcharging patients, wasn't it?
I don't think we were making those connections, and I don't think we ever said overcharging, but the financial aspect of this surgery was relevant and his lifestyle that he lived as a result, to a degree, was relevant.
You were in contact with the investigator, weren't you?
No.
You participated in that process, didn't you?
No.
You knew it was going to occur?
I became aware at some stage that 60 Minutes had hired a private investigator. And I think I did tell Natalie about the type of cars or something, but I wasn't involved.
Well, you were involved by describing the type of car that Dr. Armadiris had to help the investigator find him, didn't you?
Yes.
And in your article on...
Guys, this just keeps getting better and better. Just wait, I'm telling you, this just keeps getting better and better.
Line, the photograph of my client leaning against a yellow Lamborghini was included in your article, wasn't it?
Yes.
And what I'm suggesting to you is an investigative journalist on an Australian broadsheet newspaper would not deploy a tactic like secretly following someone to picture them standing next to an expensive car.
I disagree. It's quite common.
And it's wholly discreditable conduct by you, isn't it?
No.
And you did so in order to suggest that my client is ripping people off.
No.
Now, in relation to paragraph 63, which is on the next column, you say a number of high-profile surgeons working in Australia's largest hospitals disagree, and it's a disagreement with what Mrs. Ash-Martin says. What do you mean by high-profile?
Ethically, I can't answer that.
Well, you've used the words in your story. Mm-hmm. What did you intend to convey to the reader by the words high-profile?
Ethically, I can't answer that.
So you can't answer a question about what you intended to tell the reader by using the term high-profile surgeons.
Those surgeons are part of the confidential source cohort, and I've listed information about them in my affidavit.
Right. And I'm asking you not about who they are. I'm asking you what you intended to convey to the reader by the use of the term high-profile surgeons.
They had senior positions, they were well regarded, they had... I intended to convey that they were... I'm not sure how else to answer that without divulging information that might identify them.
Now, in relation to the patients that you've got as case studies on page 11 of the news item, you say in their own words.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in relation to Michelle Ortiz, they were not her own words, were they?
They were.
And she never gave you permission to publish those words by her?
She did.
And she didn't give you permission to use her photo?
She did.
In relation to Mr. Warland, he did not give you permission to use those words?
He was the only patient who, so the practice that we adopted with this was I did the interviews, I summarised these passages, and then I called the patients and read them out line by line to make sure they were okay with it. Blythe was the only person he was out of reception during the 2-week period that I was doing that. And so I didn't read him that passage.
Are you saying that these case studies are a fair summary of the experiences of these patients?
Yes.
That is just a lie, isn't it?
No.
She's just so good. That's just a lie. You're just lying. She says that to every single person, even the ones that are up there because they had surgery and now they're in terrible pain and, they had to get things done to them to try to fix it. It's horrible. She says up there, I'm going to suggest to you that you weren't really in pain, weren't you? And you're just saying you're in pain just to get to my client. She does it over and over again.
Mr. Warland, in his conversation with you, was in fact overwhelmingly positive about his experience with osseointegration, wasn't he?
To a point.
Well, at what point in this 4-paragraph summary about Mr. Warland do you at any time mention anything positive?
That is the summarized version that was made by print editors on the digital. In the digital copy, it's a much sort of longer or more comprehensive story. But I didn't choose that particular cut. But I assume that the editors.
Osseointegration surgery, Sherry. So where they put a metal piece into your arm or your leg or whatever, so that you can attach prosthetics to it.
Were, taking what they saw to be the most important.
Well, I think it's actually the case that Blythe Warland doesn't appear in the digital one at all.
He does.
Unusually.
He does.
Yeah, I thought there was some curiosity that he just wasn't there, but I'm sure someone could correct me if I'm wrong. In relation to Rachel Ulrich, you understood that, in fact, her experience with osseointegration was ultimately wholly successful, wasn't it?
Yes.
Now, where do you say that?
So this was the part of her story that summarised what she thought was most important about her dealings with Dr. Almadiris. As I said, the online version goes into a bit more detail, but this was what she felt was the sort of most important in terms of the public interest of sharing her story.
I want to suggest to you the online version does not go into more detail. I can show it to you. It's on page, it's in annexure, just D. And it's line A9 to A13 on page 75 of the electronic document. I mean, I might be missing something, but I can't see any additional information of substance in relation to Ms. Ulrich.
There was a separate article that had those stories in more detail in a separate webpage. But the main point with Rachel was talking about how her pre-existing health conditions, according to her, hadn't been properly prepared for and dealt with. And this was a common theme that cropped up in multiple patients, including some who, I have very limited information of, but some who ended up dying. So we thought it was important to include this part of her story because it was the most public interest. It was the highest public interest of her story.
I don't know why they don't have wigs on. That's a good question. Charlotte, I don't know how CRD is doing. Fozzie posted that in Discord that he spoke to CRD, but I've not seen or heard from CRD since all this happened.
Do you accept the answer you gave to Her Honour earlier, that these case studies were a summary of what you'd been told is just wrong?
No, it was a summary of the most important part of their story that they had allowed to be told. And as I said, there's a separate web page that has longer versions, but we didn't set out to summarize the entire patient's experience from beginning to end because we simply didn't have the capacity to do that.
Well, it was a summary of the worst things you could find, wasn't it?
No, it was a summary of the most important part that they wanted to share.
No, Miss Ulrich was a woman who was unable to walk and who now can walk. Do you agree?
I agree with that.
And she can dance. Do you agree?
I don't know about that.
She can rock climb. Do you agree?
I don't know about that.
Hikes through deserts and sand dunes and jungles. Do you agree?
I don't know about that, but we were never seeking to convey that this was one part of her story.
You were never seeking to convey a fair account of what happened to these patients, were you?
I disagree with that.
And you agree, don't you, that by alleging in relation to Ms. Ulrich that she almost died after surgery with my client, you are accusing my client of serious professional negligence.
To a degree, yes.
What do you mean to a degree?
Well, that's your summary of it. I accept that these are serious allegations and I accept that her experience was quite profound and a number of mistakes were made. So we thought that her story was in the public interest to share, in her words.
No doctor told you before publication that she almost died, did they?
She told me that.
So you were willing to make an allegation in the newspaper about my client that he'd nearly caused the death of a 35-year-old woman, or younger at the time, without checking it at all.
I did. I had a number of conversations with her. She'd also repeated the exact same story in public forums. So I'd seen that she'd sort of consistently told the same story. And as I said before, this had been a problem that had been repeated in other case studies where people had died. So I trusted her account of the story. That's what she told me.
You didn't take any steps to verify if what she was telling you was true.
That's not true.
And the fact that she had repeated the same story a few times is not a process of verification as far as you're concerned.
It's a consistent retelling of a story, and that's why we put it in their own words.
And it was utterly disgraceful of you as a journalist to make that allegation in a national newspaper without checking it in any way. Do you agree or disagree?
Disagree.
And you said earlier that her story was consistent with others. There was no other story that you were told to the effect that my client had nearly killed someone because of some pre-existing blood clotting issue, was there?
There were 2 patients who died in very suspicious circumstances, and family members of those 2 patients who had questions about the care taken by your client.
Wendy Hancock, you were told, died of natural causes by the coroner, weren't you?
Partly, that was what I was told, but there were other facts about her case as well that I was told.
The doctors involved, namely the coroner, you were told, saw nothing suspicious about the death of Wendy Hancock such that they did not even need to have an inquest.
No, I didn't have any access to the coronial documents.
You were told that there was no inquest because there was a conclusion that she died of natural causes.
I don't recall that.
Well, you were told it in writing by the court, weren't you?
I don't recall that.
And you have utterly no basis to sit there in that witness box and make an allegation in the federal court that patients of my client died in suspicious circumstances. Do you, Miss Grieve?
That was what was told to me.
You believe everything you told?
No, you were asking me why I believed and why this was in the public interest.
No. What I'm putting to you is you had no basis to say in the witness box that you had information that my client's patients had died in suspicious circumstances.
I disagree.
And in fact, what you'd been very clearly told in relation to Ms. Hancock is that that wasn't the case.
I don't believe that. No, I was not told that there were no problems around her death.
And in relation to Ms. Fulcher, you weren't able to get any information at all, were you?
I understand that there was a lengthy investigation that went on and an inquest was not called, but I was not able to get access to those documents.
You understand how the coronial system works?
Yes.
You understand that if there are suspicious circumstances, an inquest occurs?
In some cases.
You understand that the coroner is an expert in determining these matters?
Sometimes, as it was told to me, they have investigations with no inquests.
Now, I'd like to now ask you to reconsider your answer. Do you sit here and maintain that this part of the article, in their own words, is a fair summary of the experiences of these people in relation to my client?
It's an accurate summary of what the patients told me and what we considered to be in the public interest.
And what it is you, in a summary form, taking the most egregious comments you could from these people, tipping a bucket on my client, isn't it?
I disagree.
And you intended it to be as harmful as possible, didn't you?
No.
And you in no way tempered the language used by these patients by informing the reader of all of the positive things they had to say about my client. Isn't that right?
No, in the full version of this particular section of the publications, it says at the top, some words to the effect that the majority of patients are very happy. These are some who aren't.
We'll have a look for that. In a full version, you think?
Yeah, it's a separate article.
All right. Now, do you remember I'm not going to show you the broadcast, but I'll just show you briefly Annexure B to the Statement of Claim. What role did you have in putting together this broadcast?
Sorry?
What role did you have in putting together the broadcast?
The main broadcast?
Yes.
So I found the people who spoke. I created briefing documents. I did research. I assisted with the organisation of the shoots. I did
you were interviewed?
scripts. I was interviewed, yes.
You reviewed the scripts?
Yep, some of them. We sat in meetings, discussed this.
Now, you agree, don't you, that this program was marketed as a special edition of 60 Minutes?
I don't recall that, but perhaps.
What did you understand a special edition of 60 Minutes was?
Perhaps it was referring to the fact that it was a collaboration with the papers and that it was quite a lengthy broadcast.
And you understood, didn't you, that the broadcast was to be released at or about the same time as the articles going online?
Yes.
And then the hard copy articles coming out the next day?
Yes.
And prior to the broadcast, there was promotional material for a few days before the broadcast?
Yes.
And there was a abandoned publication a few weeks earlier, which included some promotional materials, but then the broadcast was delayed. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, you understood, didn't you, when...
Tammy, good luck. Good luck with your surgery. We're all going with you. Good luck, good luck. Please let us know as soon as you can, as soon as you're able to, comfortably, how you're doing, because we do worry.
This show was broadcast, that what Mr. Steinfort said at paragraph 10 on page 2 was wrong?
Sorry. No.
Well, you did not understand, did you, that the maggots in Mr. Urquhart's lead had anything to do with infection?
No.
Sorry, are you agreeing or disagreeing?
Oh, sorry. He was dealing with infections and maggot infestation,
Right, and I want to suggest to you that you did not understand that the maggots were there because of the infections.
Yeah. We didn't know why the maggots were there.
Well, you know what a maggot is?
Yes.
And you know that despite what Mr. Steinfort says at some point, maggots don't breed?
Sorry, what? What was the question?
Maggots don't breed?
I don't know about that particular point, no.
Well, they're the result of breeding. They're the babies.
Sure. I don't know the anatomy of it, but infection, it could have been necrotic tissue. We don't exactly know.
So you didn't know at the time?
Why the maggots were there?
Yes.
We were told that it could be a range of factors, but the most likely one was the exposed bone, which was causing the infections.
Now, do you recall over the page, after describing or after including some extracts from Miss Ash Martin, Mr. Steinfort said to my client, how's it gone wrong for so many of these people? Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, you intended, didn't you, in being part of the broadcast, to convey to viewers that there was a majority of people that had suffered at the hands of my client?
Disagree.
And that, in fact, there were overwhelming patterns which you sought to portray as indicative of his entire practice.
Sorry, can you repeat that? There were patterns that were...
You sought to convey to the viewer that the examples that you were giving in these publications were indicative of his entire practice.
No, we went in both the print and the broadcast. We were at great pains to acknowledge that many people were happy, although for the ones who weren't, there was a similar pattern, and there were significant concerns.
Now, in relation to paragraph 58, yeah, I'm going to stop soon. Do you need a break, Ms. Grieve, or you're right?
No, the maggots were not there on purpose. His skin deteriorated, and then the flies laid eggs there.
In relation to Brennan Smith, you understood, didn't you, that he was only walking because he'd had the osseointegration surgery?
Yes.
And that he was told before he found out about osseointegration surgery that he was wheelchair bound for life?
Yes, I think so. Yes. I don't know that specifically he was told that, but he was in a wheelchair.
And you understood his complaint to be that he hadn't been warned about certain risks?
Yes.
He told you, didn't he, that he had been warned about a number of risks, but his suggestion was not all of them?
Yes, and not the extent of the complications and the impact that that could have.
Now, you knew, didn't you, at the time of broadcast, that Mr. Smith had not been in to see my client for some 2 years?
Sorry, repeat that?
At the time of broadcast, you knew that Mr. Smith had not been in to see my client for 2 years.
So the maggots were 2 years later, 2 years after the surgery.
I don't recall the timeline. He was a former patient. He'd seen a new surgeon.
Right. And he told you in text messages that he hadn't heard from my client's office for more than 2 years, or about 2 years.
I don't recall the 2-year comment, but that sounds about right.
And you understood, didn't you, that the video you received of him saying that no one cares and cutting off his granulation tissue was taken in the weeks or months before he met you? Was that your understanding?
No.
What was your understanding as to when that video had been taken?
Can you show me the text messages that you were referring to before?
I will come to them. But can you assume for a moment that you've got a text message with Brennan Smith where he alerts you to the fact, or he claims that he's heard from my client's office in relation to some patient survey or checkup, and he expresses dismay because he hadn't spoken to them for 2 years?
Yeah, I don't recall that being said, but I'll take your word for it.
And we'll come back to it. But when did you understand the video of him chopping off parts of his leg with the kitchen knife was taken?
I don't know.
Do you have any idea?
I don't recall at this particular point, no.
Well, did you ask?
I can't recall.
Did you check the metadata?
No, I didn't check the metadata.
So you understood surely that it was important as to the timing of that video, whether or not my client was responsible for the conduct of Mr. Smith as depicted in that video, didn't you?
No.
Well, the allegation in relation to Mr. Smith was what sort of surgery leaves you having to cut your own flesh off, wasn't it?
Yes.
And if Mr. Smith was cutting his own flesh off years after he discontinued his relationship with my client, surely that was a relevant matter to you.
No, because as I understood, I don't know the timeline of what happened, but the hypergranulation tissue was as a result of the way that your client had performed the surgery, and that created the ongoing complication of hypergranulation, which lasted for many years after the operation was performed, and it's still happening today. And he still attributes blame to your client for not doing the surgery properly in the first place.
Even though he told you when you interviewed him in September or in June or July 2022 that Andrew Wines had in fact cured him of the problem.
I don't recall.
Well, you knew he'd been to see Dr. Wines in May or a few months before he met you.
Yes.
And you knew that Brennan Smith was saying to you that he was now doing extremely well at the time that he met with you. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's right. He had less pain, less frequent pain, and the surgery had gone well.
Well, you describe in your affidavit getting some footage of him riding his bike and doing other active things. Isn't that right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was your understanding that from Mr. Smith's perspective, that the surgery with Dr. Wines had cured him at that point.
Yeah, to a degree. Yeah.
When you say to a degree, he told you that he'd gone to Dr. Wines and Dr. Wines had rectified the situation, didn't he?
Yes.
Now, in those circumstances, knowing that the situation could be rectified and had been rectified as far as you knew at the time of broadcast by Dr. Wines, you understood, didn't you, that it was not true to suggest that he was forced to cut off his own flesh?
I disagree with that.
You understood, surely. Well, first of all, did you do any research at all about granulation tissue?
Yes.
Did you do any research about how granulation tissue is treated?
Yes.
And what did your research tell you?
Yes, so silver nitrate is an option, further surgery is an option.
But you understood he had medical options.
Yes.
And you understood, didn't you, that rather than take those medical options, he took a kitchen knife to himself?
Yes, because he'd tried multiple times to follow the instructions of the silver nitrate and it wasn't working. So it was sort of a bit of a breaking point out of desperation.
No, he claimed to you, didn't he, that he decided he couldn't be bothered to drive to the GP to get the silver nitrate, so thought it was more convenient for him to do it himself.
No.
And, well, you say you understood, did you, that it was some sort of act of desperation that he took a knife to himself?
So he had been following Dr. Almediris' instructions for a very long time, going to the GP, getting the silver nitrate. He said that that was creating an immense impact on his work life, taking up a lot of time. The pain was so severe that he wasn't sleeping at night. He was sort of, sleep deprived. And I think in that point, he took the knife to his skin. There's obviously, that was an extreme reaction.
Right. And it was an unhinged reaction, you thought, didn't you?
It was the reaction of someone in significant distress and desperation.
Didn't you think it was the reaction of someone who perhaps had some form of mental illness?
I knew that he had mental illness. He had PTSD. He, had suicidal ideations. I was aware of that.
Well, he hadn't just had ideations. He'd attempted to take his life a number of times, hadn't he, before he met my client?
I was aware of one particular time.
So you understood, didn't you, that Mr. Smith was a person who had mental health problems?
Yes.
You understood, didn't you, that it was not a normal reaction of a person who had the option to seek medical advice, to treat the problems they were having, to take a kitchen knife to themselves?
It was someone who felt as though they'd been abandoned, they were in extreme distress, and they took that option.
So.
Yes.
You used the word abandoned, and I'm suggesting to you, knowing that he had not been a patient of my client's for 2 years.
I don't think that's right. I didn't know that, and I don't think that's right.
What I want to suggest to you, it was wholly dishonest of you to publish an allegation that my client's surgery forced Mr. Smith to cut off his own flesh.
That's not right, because he on his telling, or what he told us, was that at no point did Dr. Almediris explain to him that he could be dealing with hypergranulation that could cause such extreme pain for so many years after the operation, and that maybe silver nitrate won't work, maybe you'll have to have this constant care. He didn't know that. So when that situation was unfolding, he became incredibly distressed. His PTSD was being triggered, and he felt like he had been abandoned, because on his telling, Dr. Almediris said, just go to the GP, just do the silver nitrate. He felt like he didn't have any solution to this.
He told you, didn't he, that the last time he'd seen Dr. Almediris was after he'd injured himself in a CrossFit challenge during COVID?
I don't recall that being the last time, but I'm aware of that.
And that Dr. Almediris had him flown down to Sydney to treat him immediately?
I'm not sure of whether it was immediately.
Well, in any event, in relation to Mr. Smith, you had absolutely no medical records to support the claims that he was making about what he was told or was not told prior to surgery?
I had some medical records, but not about I believe there was some. I'm not sure whether they were pre. I don't think they were pre.
You had only Dr. Wine's medical records, didn't you?
Yes, I had
Dr.
those.
Wine sent to you on the 25th of July.
Yes.
But no medical records from any of the treatment that my client had engaged in, right?
No.
Yet, despite that, dealing with a person who had a history of mental illness, you saw fit to publish an allegation on national television and in newspapers that my client's surgery had left him having no choice but to cut off his own flesh.
That's what happened.
Well, is that a serious answer that you've just given?
Yes.
Not that, in fact, he was so mentally unstable, irrespective of any treatment he received from any doctor, he was a person who might take a knife to his own flesh?
Objectively, this is not a proper basis for making assertions about Mr. Smith's mental state and what. None of this was ever put to Mr. Smith. I can understand the question being put in relation to the reasonableness of inquiries being made by the witness, but this is being put as an assertion of fact about the mental state of Mr. Smith at the time of the.
None of it's being put as a statement of fact, Your Honour. It's all being put as
a statement of fact.
Her belief, the witness's belief.
Careful and make that clear, because some of the...
Yeah, I don't intend to adduce any evidence of fact, Your Honour.
No, but the way the question is
I
phrased
understand.
makes it sound like it's a question of fact.
What I'm putting to you, Miss Grieve, is that you understood that the decision by Mr. Smith to take a kitchen knife to his own flesh in circumstances where he could have seen a medical practitioner was something caused by his own mental illness, as opposed to anything that my client did or did not do.
No, because he had tried to see the medical professional. That didn't work. He was desperate and he felt caught unawares by this new reality that he found himself in, of dealing with constant pain and this constant hypergranulation problem. So he felt like that was his option.
Did you or Mr. Steinford in your presence say to Mr. Smith or ask him, listen, BJ, when was the last time you tried to get help from Dr. Armadiris?
I don't recall that specific question.
And you didn't put to him, nor did Mr. Steinford, put to him, what was the response from Dr. Armadiris? What happened? How did he let you down? Did you?
I mean, we can look at the transcript. I think there were questions of that nature in there, yes.
I want to suggest to you at no point did either you or Mr. Steinford seek to elicit from Mr. Smith when and how and in what circumstances my client had failed to help him or respond to him or address his concerns.
It was abundantly clear to us from multiple interviews with Mr. Smith that he felt that your client had let him down by, first of all, not warning him of the extent of the risk of hypergranulation, and secondly, performing the surgery in a way that left him susceptible to hypergranulation, and thirdly, not providing him with an appropriate treatment that solved his concerns.
You never put to my client that the manner in which he performs surgery leaves patients at a higher risk of hypergranulation than would otherwise be acceptable, did you?
Sorry, what was the question?
You never put to my client that the manner in which he performs osseointegration surgery leaves patients at a...
Vicky, it's not one patient. It's a bunch of patients, a whole bunch of patients. They took, over the course of X amount of years, 60 Minutes did a show on this one doctor. And so this doctor is doing this osseointegration surgery. And it's not a common type of surgery. And what it's supposed to do is supposed to help people who have lost a limb to get a prosthetic easier. So they don't have to some of them are like strapped on and belted on and they don't stay on and they don't do what they're supposed to do. Well, this osseointegration surgery isn't, that it's not used that often. And this doctor does it in Australia. Well, he does it in places around the world. But Australia is one of the places. So he did some people in France, Australia. Well, 60 Minutes went around and they interviewed all these people and they only took the bad parts out. And the problem with that is, I don't know whether the doctor is good, bad, or I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. However, anybody who goes through this surgery or anybody who's even an amputee, they're going to have problems for the rest of their life. They are. Care and upkeep and everything. So what they did is they went around and they talked to all the people that he did this surgery on, and they did this article. But in this article, the journalism wasn't the best. And the people who they interviewed, the other doctors that they interviewed, didn't answer great. I mean, they really they lied. There's no other way to put it. She proves it on stand over and over again with these doctors. She calls in everybody for this that 60 Minutes interviewed, and then they have the not just 60 Minutes, but then they have the articles that went out, and she calls in all the doctors, and just like in that first clip we saw, not the first clip, the one we just saw before this, um, no, it was the first clip. Sorry, the preview. She says, I mean, she is technical. She's like, that's because when you did that, you weren't getting 17 degrees. You were only getting 10, right? And she's not a doctor, but she knows that from that picture, that exhibit that they gave the court, measuring the angles the way a doctor would only gives you 10%. And every single doctor that she puts up there, they spout these medical terms at her and technical procedures, and I don't know how she learned how to be a doctor when in the time of this trial, but she goes right after him and she gives them medical termination back, and she says, that's not right, and she wants to know every single source they get their information from so that she can study that source and that she can get them back. So we see a lot of the patients and we see a lot of the doctors, and we see doctors that did follow-up care, and we see all kinds of people, other lawyers in in this trial where she gets them all, and she gets them all good.
Unacceptably high risk of hypergranulation, did you?
I don't recall if we put that specifically to him.
Did you put anything to him about hypergranulation?
Tom may have asked a question along those lines in the interview. I don't recall at this point.
Did you ask him when the last time was that he saw Brennan Smith?
I don't believe we asked that, no.
Did you ask him anything about how he advises patients in relation to the treatment of granulation tissue?
I don't recall.
Well, you didn't, did you?
I think we asked broadly about risks and complications and how they're managed. I'm not sure if hypergranulation was sort of singled out.
Didn't you think, given you were going to make an allegation that it was his surgery that caused Mr. Smith to take a kitchen knife to his own leg because of hypergranulation tissue, that you should get some information from my client about it and see what he had to say?
I believe we tried.
Well, you say you made some attempt to address the specifics of some patients and my client wasn't aware of whether that was legal. Mr. Steinfort quite cleverly got around that when it arose by asking non-specific questions generally, didn't he?
Yeah.
And no such general or non-specific question was asked of my client in relation to the ongoing treatment of granulation tissue, was it?
I don't recall. It might not have been.
And you understood, didn't you? Well, was the video of Mr. Smith cutting his own flesh shown to my client?
I don't recall. It may have been. Yes, he was aware of that. I remember speaking to him after the interview. It was either discussed in the interview or after the interview. I remember speaking to him generally about Mr. Smith. And I don't recall if we showed him the video, but I remember talking to him about the situation he was in.
Well, do you think showing him in the video would have been an important thing to do?
Potentially, but I remember describing it and asking how did this happen?
So is this something that appears in the footage that you've produced?
Diane, that's horrible. That is horrible. We're all here for you. Go into Discord. You can talk anytime. Come into Discord with us. We're all going to be with you through this whole thing. I'm sure there's plenty of people in chat and in Discord that, have gone through it. And, they're there to help. Yes, Cloud, cancer sucks. Cancer sucks.
In relation to that interview?
I don't recall if it happened in the footage or afterwards when we had a significant conversation with Dr. Almaderas after the interview that went for about 45 minutes, where a range of more specific claims were discussed, and that video and that his experience was mentioned.
And was that recorded by anyone at Channel 9 or by you?
No.
Now, in relation to this broadcast, you agree, don't you, that when you refer to a patient at paragraph 84, actually starts at paragraph 81, called Amani, you had no permission to refer to her in any of your publications?
Sorry, it's just frozen again.
Well, you remember Amani?
Yes.
A patient from Iraq?
Yes.
And you exchanged a couple of very brief messages with her?
Yes.
That you translated via Google Translate?
Yes, that was before we got the translator.
And she never turned up for an interview with you?
Yes.
And you had no permission to discuss her online?
She didn't want to participate in an interview, but the photos that we gleaned were from her public Instagram account, and her case had been discussed on the ABC before, so we felt confident reporting her story, as limited information as we had.
Well, you say Amani is one of 84, one of dozens of patients I've spoken to. That wasn't true. You didn't speak to her, did you?
I did speak to her.
And in fact, what occurred was you exchanged some messages that you Google translated. Do you remember that?
Yes, but we also had a brief conversation with the translator.
Well, what in fact happened is there was no conversation. Do you remember that?
Sorry, say again?
There was no conversation?
There was a conversation.
And the translator spoke to her on your behalf and you exchanged text messages with the translator.
To my memory, we were all on the call together. Briefly, it could have been partially just her and the translator, but I remember us setting up a group call vaguely. I might be wrong on that.
Did set up a group call, but she never turned up. Do you remember that?
Yes, but there were a few occasions where we made contact with her.
Translator told you that Amani had said that she needed to check with the producer of a documentary that was being made about her before she cooperated with you. Do you remember that?
Before she sat down for the interview.
Well, before she cooperated with you at all. Do you remember that? And she never gave you consent to discuss her case in your publications. Isn't that right?
That's not right.
And then after your publications, she wrote a complaint to you about it, didn't she?
Yes.
Telling you she did not consent to her being used in your publications. Do you agree?
Yeah, I remember receiving that. There were a few complaints of that nature that appeared to be,
Well, you didn't remove her, did you?
No.
She still appears in the broadcast that's available online?
Yes.
Now, you also, as part of the process in being interviewed by Mr. Steinfort, talked about Cambodian patients. Do you remember that?
Yes.
You never spoke to any Cambodian patients, did you?
I arranged for a translator to speak to them.
So you sent an email with some questions?
Yes.
And the translator wrote back that there were some answers to the questions?
Yes.
And you, in the course of doing that, never got consent from patients in Cambodia to discuss their details in an article, did you?
That's not true.
At no point did you have any consent to use those stories?
I disagree.
You never spoke to them or met them personally, did you?
No.
You had no idea if they were credible?
I believed they were credible.
But based on what?
Based on the fact that they were telling their stories. I had no reason to believe that they were lying.
You used portions of the email from the translator to present a picture in another article that was specifically about Iraq and Cambodian patients. Is that correct?
Yes.
What I want to suggest to you, what Mr. Steinfort says at paragraph 87, that you'd spoken to several patients in Iraq and Cambodia who felt neglected after Dr. Armendariz operated on them and then flew home to Australia. That's just not true, is it?
It is true.
And the Cambodian patients never said, whether in writing or otherwise, that they had felt neglected.
They'd said words, I can't remember them exactly, but to the effect that they hadn't seen the surgeon, they were trying to get help and they didn't know where to go.
You did not put, did you, to Dr. Well, you spoke to Jim Galogly, didn't you?
Yes.
And he told you about his follow-up in relation to the patient?
No, it was a very brief conversation with Jim.
Well, you did not put to him, did you, that the Cambodian patients had been neglected after Dr. Armendariz left?
No.
Did you put to Dr. Armendariz that he had neglected the Cambodian patients after he left?
I believe we raised it at some point. I don't recall which point.
Now, you then also, at paragraph 88, some say it's been fantastic, some say they've felt abandoned. So there's a similar pattern of, I guess, over-promising and under-delivering. Do you see that?
Yes.
And what you're there suggesting is that overwhelmingly, despite what you've said in the first two sentences, the pattern that you've discovered is the latter, namely that there's been over-promising and under-delivering.
In some patients.
Well, you said there's a similar pattern.
Yes.
So you're trying to suggest it's not just some patients, that it is representative of my client's practice, weren't you?
No, what I was saying is that there's a similar pattern to the patients in Australia who believe that there's been over-promising and under-delivering.
Now, in relation to paragraph 104, there's an allegation by Shona Stewart that she decided to leave when she was asked to approach a terminal cancer patient.
Hang on just one sec. Yes.
You didn't verify that in any way, did you?
I believe we did get the name at some point.
But you never actually checked her version, which was that she'd been asked to approach that patient.
I don't think so. No, I think we just took her on her word.
You didn't put that to Dr. Armendariz, did you?
I don't believe that specific claim, no.
And what? All right. In relation to paragraph 105, as to what Mr. Steinfort says, you understood, as I've already put to you, that my client was not in charge of the rehabilitation of the patients. There were other doctors doing it.
So yeah, there were other people in charge of rehab, but they were still his patients. And his duty of care didn't finish when he finished the surgery.
Sure, but at no point in these publications, correct me if I'm wrong, do you explain to the reader that these patients are put into the care of specialist rehabilitation physicians after surgery, do you?
There's a lot we included and didn't include. We had multiple stories of, even in those rehab centres when patients were trying to get Dr. Armendariz to come there because there'd been something that had gone seriously wrong. He didn't come. So there were a lot of stories. There was a lot more that we could be said about the rehabilitation care, but there's a lot we didn't include and there's a lot we did include.
Included because you knew that the rehabilitation care was dealt with by rehabilitation physicians and not my client.
Well, no, because he was still responsible for their care.
But nowhere, and correct me if I'm wrong, did you inform readers or viewers that the rehabilitation was carried out by expert rehabilitation physicians, did you?
I don't recall, but I think we did say that people had gone to the hills for rehab. I'm not sure we made that specific claim, but we did reference the hills as a rehabilitation clinic.
Now, in relation to charging for surgeries, you I think actually I withdraw that. I think I've already asked you that in relation to the article. Now, paragraph 114, in relation to Dr. Anstey, those two sentences are cut from two different interviews, aren't they?
I don't know.
The first sentence comes from material where Dr. Anstey was talking about cosmetic surgeons. Do you remember that?
I don't recall.
And the second sentence comes from another shorter interview that was conducted at another time. Do you agree with that?
I don't particularly recall the sequence of that, no.
And
I don't know anything about my own article. I'm so sorry. I don't recall.
in relation to the further comments by Dr. Anstey about APRA, you contacted APRA, didn't you?
Yes.
And they explained to you that APRA was not in charge of investigating surgeons in New South Wales?
Yes, but over the phone, one of them had mentioned that they are responsible for things like advertising breaches or testimonials. There were aspects of his conduct that we were looking at that they could look at.
Well, the APRA representative specifically said to you that in relation to complaints about New South Wales surgeons, the Medical Council and the HCCC were the appropriate bodies to speak to.
Yes, and we went to them as well.
And you agree, don't you, that in publishing the comments of Dr. Anstey about how useless APRA was, you were misrepresenting the position to viewers?
No.
And you understood, didn't you? And it's at 302. I'll just read it out. Mr. Steinfort says at 298, there've never been any adverse findings against Dr. Almeidas, but whether allegations like those we've heard tonight are investigated will be up to several industry watchdogs. The peak regulator, APRA, refused our request for an interview, and many believe it's their silence, in fact, that speaks volumes. You see that?
Yes.
That was wholly dishonest to publish, wasn't it?
No.
They hadn't refused an interview.
They did.
Because they didn't wish to speak. They explained to you that they were not the appropriate regulator to speak to.
No. We knew a lot of these things existed in a regulatory grey zone, and we wanted someone with authority to provide an interview, to provide expertise on that. APRA could have done that. They could have spoken in general terms. They declined the interview.
And they complained to you shortly after publication about the fact that you had misrepresented them, didn't they?
Yes. But, yeah.
And despite receiving that complaint, you didn't change any of the publications, did you?
No.
So you think, do you, that you know better than APRA itself as to what its role is?
No.
Did you look at its website?
When?
Before publication?
Yes.
And did you notice on the website it expressly says in relation to New South Wales, the appropriate bodies are the HCCC and the Medical Council?
Yes, I was fully aware of that, but there are other issues that they could have commented on, such as when there is a medical negligence case brought against a practitioner like your client, that APRA has chosen not to publish those claims, even if they settle for large sums of money. So there were a number of issues that they could have commented on, but they chose not to.
It's not up to APRA as to whether or not a confidential settlement is published.
It is. There is a discussion going on about whether they should be forced to, because there are there's a regulatory discussion going on.
Right. There's a discussion as to whether it should be up to APRA, but today, and as at the date of your publication, APRA did not have that power. Do you agree or disagree?
They have the power to publish prior conditions or prior complaints that might be on someone's register, and they haven't done that.
That's got nothing to do with medical negligence claims that you just described, does it?
All I'm saying is there's a range of things that APRA could have commented on in relation to this, and we went to the HCCC as well.
And then you have a Victorian surgeon at 299 to 302 then saying that APRA doesn't do its job properly, right? You see that?
Yes.
You didn't consider it misleading that you had a Victorian surgeon where APRA does look at the conduct of surgeons, complaining about APRA and its silence in relation to a New South Wales surgeon where the same rules don't apply?
I disagree.
Right? And then you've got a quote from Dr. Anstey about APRA doing nothing for 20 years. You see that?
Yes.
What did you understand he was talking about there? Doing nothing about what for 20 years?
About problematic surgeons, high-profile surgeons, patient complaints, practitioner complaints, the broad spectrum. I mean, investigating patient complaints is one part of what APRA does.
What Dr. Anstey was talking about was his complaint that non-surgeons who carry out cosmetic surgery call themselves cosmetic surgeons. That was the context of that quote in 302, wasn't it?
No, he had expressed to me, we've had many conversations about APRA and its efficacy and its role, and he believes that APRA is failing on a number of issues.
The quote that is on camera in the broadcast during the interview was directed to Dr. Anstey's complaint about those who call themselves cosmetic surgeons, wasn't it?
I don't recall that specific question and answer, but the way it's written is consistent with his view about a range of problems with APRA.
Now, you knew at paragraph 180 where Mr. Steinfort said, no, we've got to put everything to you, you definitely should be having a right of reply, that was false, that 60 Minutes did not give my client a right of reply to everything.
I disagree.
And in relation to that part, that was part of the interview that was filmed after Mr. Steinfort told my client the interview was over, wasn't it?
I don't recall.
Have you rewatched the footage?
I did, but a few weeks ago.
And you don't recall that was a conversation that occurred after Mr. Steinfort said the interview was over?
I don't recall that specifically.
Now, the only surgeon who told you that maggots were something that was never seen was Dr. Anstey, isn't that right?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
The only surgeon who told you that he'd never seen maggots before was Dr. Anstey.
I don't believe that. I think maggots was one of those things that I was consistently asking many surgeons, saying, is this normal? Is this common? You know, what would you do? And I can't recall specifically right now who and what, but yeah, it was a question I was consistently putting to surgeons, and it wasn't, yeah.
None of them said to you they'd never seen maggots before, did they? Other than Dr. Anstey?
I don't recall whether, yeah.
I didn't realize it was that prominent. Yikes. Yikes. Urgh.
I don't recall.
And in particular, no surgeon who dealt with in orthopaedics told you that they'd never seen maggots before, did they?
I believe a few did, yeah.
Now, one of the allegations made against my client is in relation to a hotel room where a Dremel drill is used. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Now, you understood, didn't you, that the use of the drill was in relation to removing an external fixed metal component that had become stuck?
Was that the dual cone?
Yes.
Yeah, I was sort of unclear on that, whether that was an internal part or an external part, because it's sort of half in, half out. So I remember trying to ask people about that and figure out whether that was internal or external. I didn't get it.
So you didn't know whether it was or not?
As I understood it, it was sort of half-half.
Well, when Mr. Steinfort says at 2:40, even more alarming is this: a colleague boasting about how Dr. Amadeus treated a patient in a Kentucky hotel room using a Dremel, a drill you can buy at a hardware store. And then you've got someone recorded there using a Dremel, a lot of water, and at least 6 hours of Munjid, me and someone else taking turns on the Dremel. We finally cut it out. Viva la Dremel. You see that?
Yes.
Now, by using the word treat and by not explaining that the drill was being used as a metal part. You were imputing, weren't you, to the reader or the viewer that the drill was being used on the patient's body.
Oh, no. We had a photo, I think.
So I stopped there because it was already an hour long. But there's more. There's more on my Patreon, don't worry. So it takes a while. There's already a lot of hours on my Patreon. Let me look. I'll tell you exactly. I won't tell you exactly how many hours, but each clip is like, I don't know, 6 hours long, maybe ish. Oh, wait, this one's, well, after I cut the breaks out and everything, this one's almost 3. The latest one that I just posted today is almost 3 hours. Oh no, I posted it twice. Yep, that's me. And then there's one that's 2 hours, another one that's 3 hours, another one that's a little over 1 hour, another one that's 5 hours. So that one's 7 hours. So that one probably still has the breaks in it, and you're gonna have to fast forward. There's hours and hours and hours of this goat on my Patreon already, and I'll put more. No, no, Sarah, it's still, this trial is still going on. The trial has been going on for years, not just the case, the trial, and it's still going on. Who knows? um, yeah, maybe your grandkids will know the end. Maybe someday. But I mean, I'm still gonna keep getting it when I can and putting more hours up. But yes, Donald, yes, they started interrogate. What's the word? They put witnesses on the stand years ago. And then it just keeps getting, so in Australia, um, it's kind of weird. So, like in America, the prosecutor has the burden to prove what they have, and they show like all of the evidence and what they're going to do. In Australia, the defense starts first, and the defense has to guess sort of what the prosecutor's going to kind of do and lay down their defense first, and then the prosecutor gets to go up. Or that's the way it is in this case. So I don't know if that's the way it is in criminal or not, but that's what she was talking about. I think when I showed that accidental clip right before I showed this one, the 8-hour clip, she's talking about how there was a bunch of things that were put in that weren't in discovery, and she has to go first. So they're going to put them in, and she doesn't have a chance to research and everything, and she's in another big trial. This woman works hard, let me tell you. I'm enamored. I'm enamored of her, if you haven't figured it out. She works so hard. She does such a good job. Yes, Cloud, thank you. Everybody come over to Discord. Come over to Discord and talk more. There's a memes page I love. You can show your cats and your dogs and your, well, if you're in Australia, your gigantic monster spider pets. There was a wallaby, wombat. What was that, Carolyn? It was cute, whatever it was. No, enamored. Did I say enameled? It's enamored. I'm enamored. I don't know what show you're talking about. Says the show was so good I recommend it. It's about Australian courts on Netflix, and it starts with an R, the name of it. Don't worry, I just posted that there. So now in my comments, everybody will start saying what it is. Oh, Donald, you got me. Oh man. Listen, no, no, Sarah, no, no, bad, bad. I need a spray bottle. Psst, psst, psst. Ah! I'm never going to sleep again, ever, ever. Uh, what, Kelly? Kelly, in criminal, what is that? In criminal, the prosecution, the defense will go first. I don't know, but you shouldn't have arachnophobia. I know I shouldn't say that because it's arachnophobia, and you have it. So, but writers are so helpful and not hurtful at all, and so helpful. Go pet one, and you'll see. Just pet it a little bit. Don't squish it, Donald. Donald, don't squish it. I can't get a flamethrower. If I had a flamethrower, I would be in jail. Let me tell you. Okay, last time. Go to Discord. Thank you, Cloud. Thank you, thank you. All right, guys. Thank you so much for coming out to the stream today. I appreciate it. I appreciate the chat so much. It's awesome. Awesome, awesome. Behave. I work a double today, but I'll try to get something on for tomorrow. Wish me luck. Goodbye, guys. I'll see you soon. Thank you. Oh, wait. Love you, Cloud.